watching TVC Breakfast. It is now no more than a month since Nigerian borders were shut as a result of the joint security exercise by the Customs, Immigration and other security agencies aimed at securing Nigeria's borders.
The closure is having an effect on the prices and availability of some basic food items in Nigeria. In the last few weeks, the cost of the 50 kg bag of rice has jumped by 10 to 40%. It has increased from an average of 13,000 naira to 15,000 naira and now goes for 16,000 naira to 20,000 naira, depending on the brand.
The closure has also affected the price of poultry products, cooking oil, beans, fairly used clothes, shoes and bags.
Now, before the closure of the border, you were selling a kilo of chicken 1,000 naira. Now it's 1,800. 1,800 for the turkey, then 1,600 for the chicken. I know it's not everybody that can afford it.
Joining me now is Business and Technology Advisory, Adekunle Akindeji. Adekunle, good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see you.
Same here.
All right. Now, government has said at one time, we heard the president say that Nigeria has full sufficiency in food. And we have also had the former Minister of Agriculture at one time or the other also talk about the issue of sufficiency. Now that the border is closed, we're seeing prices of food are rising. Does it seem obvious that there's something wrong with the sufficiency and adequacy within the country?
Well, the term sufficiency can only be explained by government. I think it's a relative word. So I'm not sure if we're self-sufficient in ourselves as a nation to produce or what we need to consume. I think what has happened over a period of time is a complementary approach where we do grow some of the things that we consume, but I think largely of some of those things that we consume come from, you know, outside borders or outside worlds. So we may be sufficient in few, you know, aspects or categories, but I do not think that we are in its entirety sufficient in everything that we need.
All right, we have received, there has been commendation for the closure of the border in the area of the prevention of smuggling of petroleum product out of the country. But if you look at the other way around, when it comes to the closure of borders in the 21st century, is that a policy that is welcome globally these days?
So globally, there are clamor for closure of borders and whatnot. But I think that we need to look inwards and look at our own setup and economy before we take decisions. I've always said, and I think I mentioned it on this program the other time, that we have good policies, but the way we implement them are issues. For security reasons and for other reasons, borders should be closed, but you don't shut down on things that gives you life in itself. When you look at what has happened, so we depend largely on outside world, just like I mentioned to you, for certain categories of food or, you know, or product. When you shut down the border, what you're technically doing is shutting down the life or the value chain of that particular,
or the live stream
of that particular sector. Right. So what you would have is people begin to look for an alternative. Question is, can we have a more holistic plans to this? Can we categorize some of those products that we think that locally we want to grow? And
there were 41 items earlier.
That's a lot. That's a lot. You know, so if you pick one, for example, the dairy industry, I understand we consume about 1.7 million tons of milk, I mean powdered one, yearly. Locally, we can only produce about 600,000. That's a deficit that you cannot meet up. Now, so the strategy should have been that government should encourage guys who are in that space locally to build, whether a cold room, or whether a value chain locally, buy up people who are in that industry locally, train them, and grow that sector. Rather than shutting down at once to increase capacity. Right. Because, I mean, hunger, once you've taken hunger out of the whole equation, every other thing can be managed. Right. And I think that it should, our policies are good, but the way we implement them, we need to begin to work on them. And I must say, there are a lot of it coming together at once. So there's the banking one, which is increase in when you make a deposit or when you withdraw, there is the issue around the salaries and what have you. There's the issue around online purchase and charges. Okay. So everything is just coming all
All right.
together and effective one.
Before we go now, when it comes to taking advantage of this space right now,
Yes.
what do you think local industries should be doing to take advantage of this? Because you talked about the fact that there is still a huge deficit. They can't meet the demand. And that is good for business if you see from that window.
Yes, so it might be good for business, but only if you're prepared for it.
All
so
right.
there are basic foundation or basic necessity for this to happen. One is infrastructure. The other one is knowledge barrier. So you need over time to have made provision for knowledge transfer from outside world if need be. And then there has to be an infrastructure to be able to support this particular process or policy that you're putting in place. Right. Otherwise, we're just in a hollow.
All right. Okay. Now, there's also the talk about, you talked about the issue of policy earlier on. If we have to look at this, because the government just decided to, close the border, which seemed like one of the measures that tomorrow they can just decide to open it and it's just, but when it comes to being strategic, how do you think that should be approached so that if we're closing the border and we're closing it for a year or something, we should be more consistent?
So I think the first thing also is that communication has been very poor. So there have been allegations that border was closed based on security issues. Some have said it's another way for government to try to stimulate the economy and grow the economy. Either ways, I think that there are better ways to go about this. I'll give you an example. Some of these products or items that have been listed, we know that somehow it will still find its way back into the economy. Can we begin to say, for example, poultry production, instead of you smuggling them in, you begin to pay a certain, so create a border, close it up. When you need to come in, begin to make people pay some kind of, what do you call it, if you call it tax, whatever you want to call it.
Tariff.
Or tariff on it. It will, so you would legally be allowing this to come in while you grow your internal economy, but shutting down and then just expecting people to fold their hands and deal with what they have I don't think would work in my own opinion.
All right. Thank you very much, Adekunle Akindeji, for coming on the. It's now more than a month since Nigerian borders were shut as a result of the joint security exercise by the Customs, Immigration and other security agencies aimed at securing Nigeria's borders.
The closure is having an effect on the prices and availability of some basic food items in Nigeria. In the last few weeks, the cost of a 50 kg bag of rice has jumped by 10 to 40%. It has increased from an average of 13,000 naira to 15,000 naira, now goes for 16,000 naira to 20,000 naira, depending on the brand.
And the closure has also affected the price of poultry products, cooking oil, beans, fairly used clothes, shoes and bags.
Now, before the closure of the border, you were selling a kilo of chicken 1,000 naira. Now it's 1,800. Yeah, 1,800 for the turkey, then 1,600 for the chicken. I know it's not everybody that can afford it.
Well, joining me now is Business and Technology Advisory, Adekunle Akindeji. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast. Good morning.
Thank you for having
now,
me.
the intention of government when it brought up this policy was to check the activities of smugglers, to curb insecurity and all of that. But it seems the implications are far-reaching. ECOWAS is complaining. We have people who do business legitimately along those lines complaining, and now the citizens are complaining about a hike in the prices of goods.
Yeah, so I think we're going to have more of this complaint comes in, except we take a proper look at the policy. And I must say that the policy in itself is not bad. I just feel the effects on people is what we need to carefully sit down to look at. So, for example, how do we make a provision for the shortfall? I mean, because the closure already has distorted the value chain, the consumer value chain. So from various products that you can think of, whether it's dairy, whether it's staple food, whatever it is, you then find out that the prices are going up because the demand for it is now on the high side, and the supply is definitely on a shortfall.
Does that show a lacuna somewhere, that there is the capacity to actually, close this gap when it comes to self-sufficiency has not been bridged?
Not anytime soon.
Not anytime soon.
Not anytime
even if
soon.
we have to do so.
Not anytime soon, because if you look at There are two things playing up in this particular. One is the policy side, which is the closure. The other side of it is that usually some of these products are seasonal foods. So some in this part of the country, even if there was no closure of the border, there are times you don't have pepper, tomatoes, around. Now, when you combine that with the closure of the borders, so what you're going to have is there's a need and a demand for this food, and there's a closure as to where they're being taken from. So I think that the list that we have in terms of what needs to be taken out is too much. We probably have to start with about 5 or 6. Bring up the ones that are what you can consider as good to have and not must have. Rice, for example, is a daily food that every average Nigerian would have. Frozen food is a daily food that every average Nigerian will have. So I think that we need to carefully go back to the list. We need to do more. If the issue is around wanting people to do business legally, there are ways to go about it. But if it's about security, because that's the other thing. So people say the border is closed for security purposes. Some said it's closed because you want to stimulate the economy and make local producers to be able to do that.
For security purposes and to check smuggling as well.
But that's not enough.
That is not enough.
So because of security, so there are security apparatus that already exist in this country, intelligence. So how do people come in? Who are these people? How do they lodge in money? Where do they do transaction? So you can begin to mitigate some of those things from other sector or from other side of the economy, rather than just shutting. I'm not against making people do business legally, but at what cost? To Nigerians. Do we have alternatives? No. So the local production of rice...
Do we have the capacity to bring about the alternatives?
We may build that capacity, but currently we do not have it.
All right, Adekunle Akindeji, we'll have to leave it at this point. Thank you for your time on TVC
Pleasure.
Breakfast.
Thank you.
TVC Breakfast. It is now more than a month since Nigerian borders are shut as a result of the joint security exercise by the Customs, Immigration and other security agencies aimed at securing Nigeria's borders.
The closure is having an effect on the prices and availability of some basic food items in Nigeria. In the last few weeks, the cost of a 50 kilograms bag of rice has jumped by 10% to 40%. It has increased from an average of 13,000 naira to 15,000 naira initially to a new rate now of 16,000 to 20,000 naira depending on the brand.
The closure has also affected the price of poultry products, cooking oil, beans, fairly used clothes, shoes and bags.
Now, before the closure of the border, you were selling a kilo of chicken 1,000 naira. Now it's 1,800. 1,800 for the turkey, then 1,600 for the chicken. I know it's not everybody that can afford it.
All right, joining us now in the studio, joining me in the studio is Tunji Abdulhammed. It's good to have you join us right now.
Thank you for having me.
Very good. Now, when it comes to the issue of closing the borders and so on, the impact, because of the position Nigeria occupies, there's going to be impact on neighboring countries. What kind of engagement should Nigeria have with these countries now? Because the point there is, if you talk about Niger Republic Niger Republic, Benin Republic, Togo, and Cameroon, they too are not getting the best of advantage of the closure of the border and even the smuggling of items through their borders into Nigeria because of what they may call capital leak.
Yeah, I think our president, about last week or so, when he met with the Benin Republic President Tolum, and on this issue, and the president promised that in a few weeks or in a few times he will consider his position. I think our borders have been porous, and we have not been doing enough in that regard. And but I don't think a total closure of the border is a solution to that, because if we are talking about, there are so many reasons why that has been done. They say it's for issue of security. They are also saying it has to do with ensuring that rice are not being imported into the country.
Smuggling.
Smuggling into the country. The point is, do we have enough of this food in our country? Do we have enough of these materials in our country? And again, that has to go also to the blame. We have to also go to the fact that those in charge of security or our border are not doing enough. To me, it's an indictment that they are not doing well, because we are saying that people are smuggling and people are also bringing in goods that are not supposed to be brought into the country.
Now, if we don't have enough locally to, cater for the demand, those who are producing locally, whether it is rice or any kind of product and all of that, how can they take advantage of this space right now? Because when you have higher demand, some people say it's good for business.
The only advantage is that they will increase the price, and they want to make more money at the expense of the people, which is not good for us, because people will suffer more. I think.
But isn't that at the short run? Because the point there is when you have close to a monopoly for instance, certainly, of course, prices will increase.
I agree with you.
Until there's competition or proper competition.
We should look for a long-run solution, which it's not about closing the border in totality. We have the right to control our border. We have the right to determine what comes into our border or what does not come in. But total closure of the border, to me, as far as I'm concerned, we may even affect certain relationship with our other foreign neighboring country, because we have an agreement whereby we say there will be free trade movement between the countries. Now we are closing our border. We're not allowing them to bring in their goods. We're not bringing taking our goods to them. I think we should consider it and do a proper border tightening to ensure that things are properly screened.
Border tightening in what regard now?
I think those who are responsible for the custom, the immigration, the whatever, should do more in terms of.
Okay, so it means the instrument of tariff and taxes should be deployed rather than the outright closure.
It's not only the tariff to be employed. People who are there. We are all Nigerian. We know these things. Most of those people who are supposed to tighten that to secure these borders are making business, are using it as business. They make money for themselves. Okay. You cannot smuggle without the collaboration.
That's the corruption aspect of things.
Of course.
All right, Tunji Abdulhammed, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.